Well, as Republicans sound the alarm over HR1, a massive bill aimed at giving the federal government much more control over how states run their elections. Stacey Abrams says lawmakers in her home state of Georgia, who are actually trying to pass legislation to beef up security requirements, are trying to suppress the vote.
It's racist. It is a redux of Jim Crow in a suit and tie. Instead of celebrating better access and more participation, their response is to try to eliminate access to.
Let's start there and bring in Democratic strategist Kevin Walling and co-chair of Project 21, Horace Cooper. Welcome back to both of you. I want to read something that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution says about these different measures that state GOP lawmakers are working on. It says a review of 40 Republican-sponsored election bills show most address voting fraud and security concerns raised in the failed lawsuits. Among other things, those bills would eliminate no-excuse absentee voting, impose new identification requirements for voting absentee, curtail the use of ballot drop boxes, and provide fewer days of in-person early voting in many large counties. Horace, that is apparently an attempt to suppress the vote, especially those of minorities.
Well, absolutely. You have to separate 2 points of two issues. One is the fake claim that this is race-based. There is no evidence that having to use fewer boxes is going to affect more blacks than whites or more browns than whites or anyone else. And there's no proof or evidence that having to demonstrate actual evidence that you're a real citizen entitled to vote affects, again, one race over another. The idea that we should address the big problem that most Americans say that for the reason that they don't participate in the vote is they don't think that their vote is going to make a difference. If you provide voter integrity measures, you ensure that people can be confident that if they participate, it will matter.
This is what the Federalist says about that massive bill passed by the House, HR1. They say as long as ballots are postmarked by Election Day, HR1 would effectively mandate that all states accept absentee ballots within a 10-day window. But the bill takes it a step further, noting that elections officials would be restricted from verifying voter identification and eligibility. Kevin, if we want credibility in our balloting and our voting, and we want people to have confidence in the system, why does HR1 have so much of this stuff saying you got to get rid of voter ID, that you got to get rid of witness requirements for absentee ballots? How is that the solution?
Yeah, Shannon, it's a good question. I'm happy that the House actually passed this legislation, and hopefully we'll see a debate on this in the United States Senate, because there are a lot of good merits when it comes to this bill, especially with regards to campaign finance reform, extending early voting, absentee voting by mail, as you mentioned. So there are a lot of good components of this bill. I'm sure there are some concerns among Republicans, and let's have that debate that they have it. But again, 2020 was one of the most secure elections, according to Chris Krebs, who was the Trump-appointed Director of Election Security at the Department of Homeland Security. So you have a lot of Republicans saying that there's fraud, there's corruption, there's abuse in our system, when 2020 saw just 5 months ago one of the most secure elections in this country.
Almost
and to that point, what he was talking about was foreign interference. And so that's different than worrying about people getting their hands on mandatory mail-in ballots that went out and people weren't at the home, and maybe somebody there could have voted. You just don't know. I mean, if we want people to feel confident about it, Horace, where do we go from here? Because the two sides both want to do massive overhauls and changes to the voting system, and both sides argue that theirs is the way to get it done right.
Okay, so that's what I mean is this isn't about race. This is about political parties trying to advantage themselves. The Constitution allows political parties to try to manipulate the process. The Constitution doesn't allow the use of race as a means of accomplishing that. The problem here is Stacey Abrams and even Nancy Pelosi tries to pretend that there is a race issue when there isn't. Why not come right out and say, we're funding candidates that wouldn't otherwise get support because we Democrats want to see that we get an advantage. Let's have a debate, and then that's a real debate.
We'll watch to see if they do that in the Senate. There are pledges they will take it up. Kevin and Horace, come back once they do. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Of course, Shannon, good to see you.
You too.